General Kathira of the Xerix Empire was a warrior who had seen many battles and judged many soldiers. She was known among her people for her sharp mind, strict discipline, and her cold way of dealing with weakness. For over 30 cycles, she had commanded fleets and trained countless recruits from across the empire. She had fought pirates, defended colonies, and led her soldiers into victories against hostile races. To her, new soldiers were nothing more than pieces to be placed on the battlefield. Some were strong, some were weak, but all were predictable in their own way. That was why the order she received that morning surprised her. She stood in the command chamber of the battleship Vraxion, a massive flagship that carried thousands of warriors. The chamber was tall and lined with glowing blue screens that displayed maps of space and endless streams of military reports. Kathira's eyes, sharp and golden, moved over the order again. It had come directly from the High Council of the Xerix Empire. She was to personally evaluate a human. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. Until a short time ago, the Xerix Empire had not even known of their existence. Their homeworld, Earth, had been considered a backwater planet, far from the main trade routes. But after first contact, something about them had drawn the interest of the Council. Humans were restless, adaptable, and far more ambitious than their fragile appearance suggested. Still, Kathira did not think highly of them. She had seen one or two humans before. They were thin, soft-skinned creatures with no claws, no scales, and no natural weapons. Compared to Xerix warriors who were bred for strength and battle, humans seemed like children pretending to be soldiers. She looked at the order again, almost annoyed. Why must I waste my time on this? She thought. She had fleets to command and strategies to prepare. Yet the order was clear. She was to evaluate this human soldier, a Captain Marcus Hale, who had been recently assigned to her fleet. Kathira let out a slow breath and signaled her aide. Bring him to the training arena, she said firmly. If the council wants me to test this human, then I will test him. He will either prove himself, or he will break. The training arena was a vast space deep within the flagship. It was designed for combat drills, physical endurance trials, and tactical simulations. Rows of alien officers stood along the edges, curious to see this unusual evaluation. Word had spread quickly. The general herself was going to test a human. Many came expecting entertainment. Kathira entered first, her tall frame towering above most of her officers. She wore black armor marked with silver lines, symbols of her victories. Her expression was cold as ever. Then the doors opened and the human entered. Captain Marcus Hale walked in with steady steps. He was tall for his kind, with dark hair and a lean but strong build. His uniform was plain compared to the decorated armor of the Xerix, yet he carried himself with quiet confidence. His eyes scanned the arena without fear. Kathira studied him carefully. She had expected nervousness or hesitation, but instead she saw calm focus. That alone made her raise one brow slightly. Captain Marcus Hale, she said in her deep, commanding voice. You are here to be evaluated. Do you understand the weight of this trial? Marcus gave a small nod. I understand, General. I'll do my best. His words were simple, but there was no tremble in them. Kathira gestured to the officers. We begin with endurance. Let us see how long the human can last. The first trial was the heavy gravity run. The arena floor shifted, activating the gravity enhancers. The pull of gravity doubled, then tripled, pressing down on every step. Xerix soldiers trained under this often, but to outsiders it was brutal. Marcus began running along the marked track. At first his movements were slow, adjusting to the crushing weight. Some officers chuckled quietly, expecting him to collapse within minutes, but Marcus kept moving. His breaths came heavier, sweat formed on his brow, but his stride remained steady. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. He stumbled once, but pushed himself upright again, refusing to fall. Kathira narrowed her eyes. Even seasoned recruits struggled at this stage. Yet the human pressed on, jaw tight with determination. Finally, after 40 long minutes, Kathira raised her hand. Enough, the gravity field shut down. Marcus slowed, bending slightly to catch his breath, but he did not collapse. He looked up at Kathira, his eyes still steady. Not bad, for a human, one officer muttered. Kathira remained silent, but inside she felt the first flicker of surprise. The second trial was combat simulation. Holographic opponents appeared in the arena, shaped like alien warriors with glowing weapons. The task was simple: survive as long as possible. Marcus picked up a practice blade offered to him. It was heavier than what he was used to, but he adjusted quickly. The holograms attacked fast and relentless. At first, Marcus was pushed back, his defense clumsy. But then something changed. Instead of fighting with pure strength, he began using clever footwork. He dodged strikes instead of meeting them head-on. He let opponents' momentum work against them. He even used the environment, kicking off walls or rolling under attacks. The officers watched closely. This was not the style of a brute warrior. This was something different. Adaptability. When Marcus finally fell, after facing more than he should have managed, the arena was silent for a moment. Then a few claps of claws and hands echoed. Even some Xerix officers were impressed. Kathira crossed her arms. She did not clap, but her golden eyes studied him with growing curiosity. The final test of the day was mental. Kathira led Marcus to the strategy chamber. A holographic map of a battlefield appeared, fleets, planets, and enemy forces. The challenge was to create a plan to win against superior numbers. Marcus stood before the display thinking. "Time is limited," Kathira said. "Show us your human mind." Marcus did not rush. He analyzed quickly, his eyes moving over the map. Then he began to explain. Instead of focusing on brute strength, he spoke of misdirection, of drawing the enemy into traps, of striking where they were weakest. His plan was unconventional, even reckless by Xerix standards. But as he explained, the officers leaned forward. His ideas were bold, creative, and dangerous, yet they could work. When he finished, the room was silent again. Kathira finally spoke. Unorthodox, risky, but effective. Marcus simply said, "Sometimes the risky path is the only way forward." When the day ended, Kathira walked alone to her quarters. She was a general who prided herself on control, but she could not deny what she had seen. The human had not broken. He had not faltered in spirit. Instead, he had shown resilience, adaptability, and creativity beyond her expectations. She sat at her desk, hands clasped, staring at the report she was supposed to write. Humans. They are not what I believed. For the first time in many cycles, General Kathira felt something unusual, uncertainty, and deep inside a whisper of respect. The next morning, General Kathira stood once again in the training arena. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the artificial light, and her expression was as unreadable as ever. She had not slept much the previous night, not because of weakness, but because her mind had kept circling back to the human. Captain Marcus Hale had surprised her. That was not something many managed to do. Most soldiers she tested fit neatly into categories, strong, clever, or fragile. But Marcus had resisted being placed in any single category. He was adaptable, and that was something dangerous in a soldier. Kathira's orders from the High Council were simple. Test him. Push him, evaluate him. What they did not say was what she herself had already decided. If Marcus failed, she would dismiss him quickly. If he succeeded, she would know the truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. She stepped onto the floor where officers and recruits had already gathered to watch. The atmosphere was tense with curiosity. The idea of a human facing Xerix trials was still something many considered amusing. Captain Hale, Kathira said in her firm, commanding tone. Marcus entered, his boots echoing lightly across the arena floor. He looked tired from the previous day, but not broken. His uniform was still neat, his eyes alert. General, he greeted simply, giving a respectful nod. Kathira studied him for a moment, then spoke. Yesterday you endured gravity and combat. Today we test more. Today we see how you compare not only to yourself, but to others. The first challenge was the endurance gauntlet. Rows of obstacles shifted into place. Towering walls, swinging barriers, spinning platforms, and deep trenches. Gravity settings changed in different sections, forcing the runner to adapt every few steps. It was a test designed to break even Xerix recruits, measuring both strength and willpower. Kathira raised one clawed hand. You will not face this alone, Captain. You will run against others. 4 Xerix soldiers stepped forward, tall and armored, their eyes gleaming with confidence. They were veterans of training, not new recruits. They looked at Marcus with faint smirks, already certain of the outcome. Marcus gave no reaction. He simply stretched his arms once and stepped into position. The signal blared. The race began. The Xerics leapt forward quickly, their longer strides giving them early advantage. Marcus started slower, carefully adjusting to each obstacle. The first wall rose high above them. The Xerics climbed it with powerful grips, pulling themselves over with ease. Marcus took longer, searching for smaller handholds, but he reached the top without falling. Through the swinging barriers, the Xerics moved like flowing water, ducking and weaving. Marcus was hit once, knocked sideways, but he recovered with a surprising roll and pushed forward. The spinning platforms were worse. A Xeric slipped and fell, crashing hard. Another laughed, continuing on. Marcus crouched low, balancing with both hands and feet, crawling across where the others tried to sprint. It was slower, but it worked. By the halfway point, Marcus was behind. Many watching officers chuckled, whispering that the human would soon collapse. But then, something shifted. The trenches grew deeper, the air heavier with increased gravity. The Xerics, built for bursts of power, began to slow. Their massive muscles worked against them under the weight. Marcus, lighter and more flexible, adjusted quickly. He moved steadily, one step at a time, never stopping. One soldier collapsed, unable to continue. Another slipped into a trench and climbed out slowly, gasping for breath. Marcus passed them both. When the finish line came into sight, only one Xerix was still ahead. Marcus pushed harder, his face determined, sweat dripping down his neck. He did not sprint recklessly. Instead, he chose every step with care. At the final barrier, a wall under triple gravity, the Xerix slammed into it with brute force but failed to climb. Marcus approached, studied the wall, then used a side path, jumping to a narrow ledge and climbing with slower but steady progress. His movements were clever, not wasteful. Inch by inch he rose, and then before the stunned eyes of the officers, Marcus reached the top and crossed the finish line. First, the arena was silent for a long moment. Then whispers spread like fire. Kathira said nothing at first. She simply looked at Marcus, who stood tall but exhausted, breathing heavily yet not collapsing. Inside, however, she felt the second spark of surprise in as many days. The second test was tactical debate. In the strategy chamber, officers gathered around the holographic table. Maps of different battles appeared, starship formations, planetary defenses, and simulated invasions. Normally, these debates were between experienced Xerix commanders. Today, one seat was reserved for Marcus. Kathira introduced the scenario. An enemy fleet double the size of the defending force, attacking a vital colony. The task was to design a defense strategy. One Xerix officer immediately proposed the standard formation: concentrate ships at the choke point, reinforce with ground defenses. Another argued for a retreat to lure the enemy deeper before striking back. When it was Marcus's turn, he leaned forward, studying the hologram carefully. His voice was calm, measured. "You're both thinking about numbers," he said. "But numbers don't win battles. Choices do." The room fell quiet. Marcus explained his plan. Instead of defending the colony directly, he suggested creating decoys, false energy signatures that would make the enemy believe reinforcements were arriving. While distracted, small strike teams would hit supply ships in the rear, forcing the larger fleet to scatter. Once weakened, the defenders could strike fast, not with strength but with precision. The officers frowned. It was risky, unorthodox, even reckless. Kathira's golden eyes, however, stayed fixed on him. She recognized what others did not. His plan was not about raw power. It was about adaptability, the one trait she had already seen in him. "You rely too much on deception," one officer scoffed. "The enemy will see through it." "Maybe," Marcus admitted, "but if they do, we've still forced them to waste time reacting. In war, time can be more valuable than firepower." His words hung in the chamber. Some officers remained doubtful, but others exchanged thoughtful glances. Kathira gave a single nod. "Unorthodox, but clever." Marcus gave a faint smile. Sometimes clever is the only way to survive. The final test of the day was resilience. Kathira knew that strength and tactics were important, but true warriors were tested in the mind. So she chose a simulation chamber, where recruits faced illusions of their deepest fears. Marcus stepped inside without hesitation. The doors closed behind him. For a long time, nothing was seen. The chamber recorded his reactions but did not reveal the illusions to outsiders. Kathira watched the monitor, her eyes narrowing. Inside, Marcus faced images of destruction: burning cities, collapsing ships, faces of comrades lost. The simulation pressed on his heart, digging into his mind with despair. It whispered that he was powerless, that he would fail, that humanity itself was doomed. But Marcus refused to bend. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe steadily. He remembered his training on Earth, the lessons of his people. When the world falls apart, you hold on to hope. He shouted once, a raw sound that cut through the simulation and pushed forward. Step by step, he broke through the illusions. When the doors finally opened, Marcus emerged, pale and sweating but upright. His jaw was set, his eyes steady. The officers stared. Many of them had failed that same test in the past. Kathira looked at him long and hard. In her chest, something stirred, a feeling she rarely allowed herself. Respect. That night, Kathira sat in her quarters, her desk filled with reports. Yet her mind was not on the endless data of fleet management. It was on the human. She thought of how he had endured, how he had planned, how he had refused to break. He was not the strongest, not the fastest, and certainly not the most powerful being in the galaxy. But he had something else, something that could not be measured by numbers alone. Adaptability, willpower, creativity. And she wondered, not for the first time, if the Council had known this all along. For the first time in decades, General Kathira felt uncertainty about the future, and deep inside, a quiet realization: the human was changing the way she saw war itself. The days of tests and trials had passed quickly. Captain Marcus Hale had endured more than anyone expected. He had shown endurance, creativity, and a kind of determination that impressed even the proud Xerix officers who once mocked him. But for General Kathira, the evaluation was not yet complete. War was not only about training arenas, clever strategies, or simulations. War was chaos. It was blood, smoke, fire, and sudden choices where hesitation could mean death. Kathira knew that no trial could match the truth of battle itself. She did not have to wait long for that truth. It began with a simple report. Kathira stood in the command chamber of the battleship Phyraxian, reviewing supply lines when the alert sirens rang. The great screens flickered red and the voice of a young officer filled the room. Enemy fleet detected. Sector 9, near the edge of the Empire. Multiple ships closing fast. Kathira's golden eyes narrowed. She moved quickly to the center of the chamber, where the holographic map of space bloomed into view. A cluster of hostile ships was moving against one of the Empire's border outposts. Which enemy? Kathira demanded. The officer hesitated. It is the Kravith, General. A low murmur spread among the crew. The Kravith were a brutal race, insect-like in form, who fought with swarms of fast, sharp vessels. They were cunning raiders, known for ambushes. Facing them was never simple. Kathira studied the map. The Xerix fleet was nearby, but the Kravith numbers were overwhelming. This would not be an easy fight, and then she saw Marcus. He stood at the edge of the chamber, silent but watching, his eyes sharp on the hologram. The fleet moved quickly. Within hours, the Vraxian and its escorts jumped into the contested sector. Space outside the viewports was alive with stars, but soon those stars were drowned out by flashes of movement. The Kravith ships. They came like a storm, hundreds of them, small but deadly, darting in coordinated swarms. Kathira barked orders, her voice strong and calm. Shields up. Defensive formation. Prepare to counterstrike. The Xerix ships responded, their heavy cruisers locking into place, firing beams of plasma into the void. Explosions flared as enemy vessels fell, but more came rushing in, surrounding them. Marcus stepped closer to Kathira. General, he said quickly, if you keep the fleet locked in a defensive wall, they'll tear you apart piece by piece. The Kravith thrive on swarms. You need to break their rhythm. Kathira gave him a sharp glance. This is not a training exercise, Captain. This is war. I know, Marcus replied, his voice firm, but the principle is the same. You're letting them dictate the fight. If you keep reacting, you'll lose. Kathira felt the familiar urge to dismiss him. She was the general, the one with decades of experience. Yet, even as the thought formed, she remembered the obstacle course, the strategy debates, the simulation chamber. The human had been right before, still she hesitated. The lives of thousands were in her hands. Could she truly gamble on the words of a human outsider? The Kravith pressed harder. One Xerix cruiser exploded, torn apart by coordinated fire. Another began to fall back, its shields burning. Officers shouted. Alarms blared. The chamber shook with each hit. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. General, let me lead a small strike force. Just a handful of ships. We'll cut into their swarm, hit their supply carriers in the rear. Without supplies, they'll scatter. Kathira's claws tapped against the edge of the command table. It was madness. Sending a small force into the heart of the swarm was nearly suicide. Yet there was something in Marcus's eyes, steady, determined, not reckless, but sure. Give me the chance, Marcus said. If it fails, you lose a few ships. If it works, you win this battle. The chamber was tense. Officers stared at their general, waiting. Finally, Kathira gave a single nod. Very well. You will have your chance. But if you fail, human, this will be your last command. Marcus nodded once. Understood. Within minutes, Marcus boarded a smaller strike vessel along with a crew of mixed officers, Xerix pilots, engineers, and even one doubtful commander assigned to watch him. The ship detached from the fleet and dove into the chaos of battle. The Kravith swarmed all around. Bright flashes filled the dark enemy ships moving like angry insects. Marcus stood at the center of the strike ship's bridge, giving orders calmly. Stay low in their formation. Don't fight every ship you see. We're not here to win every duel. We're here to break their supply line. The Xerix commander scoffed. You sound like a coward, human. Marcus didn't flinch. No, I sound like someone who knows how to win. They pushed forward, weaving through the chaos. 2 enemy ships darted toward them, spitting beams of energy. Marcus called for a sharp roll, and their ship spun, letting the shots pass by. Another enemy came too close, and Marcus ordered a sudden stop, causing the pursuer to overshoot right into the fire of their cannons. Bit by bit, the strike team cut deeper into the swarm. Finally, the enemy supply carriers came into view, larger, slower ships hidden at the rear of the Kravith fleet. They were lightly guarded. The swarm focused on the main battle. Marcus pointed. There, hit them fast. Don't give them time to react. The strike team unleashed everything, missiles, plasma, rail fire. Explosions bloomed as one, then 2 carriers erupted in flames. The Kravith formation wavered instantly. Ships began to break apart, some retreating, others spinning in confusion without supplies. Pull back, Marcus shouted. Now! The strike team retreated at full speed, weaving back toward the Xerix fleet. Enemy ships chased, but with less coordination now, their swarm disrupted. Back on the Vraction, Kathira saw it unfold. The Kravith formation fractured, their once perfect swarms breaking into chaotic fragments. She did not hesitate. All ships, attack now! Break them! The Xerix fleet surged forward with renewed power. Their heavy cannons tore through scattered enemies. One by one, the Kravith ships fell until the survivors turned and fled into the void. The battle was won. The command chamber erupted in cheers. Officers shouted with triumph, their eyes glowing with pride. Yet many of them turned toward the human small vessel, which returned to the fleet scarred but alive. When Marcus stepped back onto the Vraction, Kathira was waiting. He looked tired. His uniform scorched in places, but his expression was steady. General, he said simply. Kathira regarded him for a long moment. She could have said many things. She could have reminded him that his plan had been reckless, that many lives could have been lost. She could have reminded him that she had doubted him, but instead she said only one thing. Well done. That night, alone in her quarters, Kathira sat in silence. She had seen many warriors, many commanders, many victories, but what she had witnessed today was different. Marcus had not been the strongest nor the most skilled. He had not commanded with fear or pride. He had commanded with clarity, adaptability, and something else Kathira could not easily name. He had taken the chaos of battle and turned it into opportunity. He had made the impossible possible. Kathira, the cold and disciplined general of the Xerix Empire, felt something rare. She felt shaken. For the first time in decades, she admitted to herself that she had underestimated someone. The human had not only survived the trial of fire, he had changed the course of the battle itself. And deep inside, Kathira wondered if this was only the beginning. The battle with the Kravith was over, but its memory still burned in the minds of everyone aboard the Vraxian. The wreckage of destroyed enemy ships drifted in the darkness of space, glowing faintly with dying fire. The Xerix fleet had taken damage, but they had survived, and more than that, they had won. For General Kathira, the victory was not the strangest part. Victories were expected. Victories were her life. What unsettled her was the reason behind this particular victory. A human. Captain Marcus Hale had stood against doubt, against tradition, and against overwhelming odds. And he had succeeded. The fleet returned to the central starbase of the Empire. It was a massive structure, a floating city of steel and light orbiting above a pale blue world. As the ships docked, crowds of soldiers and civilians gathered to see them arrive. Victorious fleets always drew attention, but this time the whispers were louder, spreading like a current. They say a human saved the fleet. A fragile outsider? Impossible. The general herself trusted him. Kathira ignored the noise. She walked through the docking bay with her usual cold discipline, her black and silver armor shining under the artificial lights. Marcus walked a few steps behind her, silent but steady. His uniform was patched from battle, his face still marked with fatigue. But his head was high. The council had summoned them both. The council chamber was vast, shaped like a circle, with tall spires of glowing crystal rising into the ceiling. 12 high counselors sat upon raised thrones, their eyes sharp, their presence heavy. They ruled the empire not by force of arms, but by wisdom, tradition, and iron will. Kathira stood before them with Marcus at her side. "General Kathira," one counselor said, his voice echoing across the chamber, "you were tasked to evaluate the human soldier. We expected a report. Instead, we received news of a great battle, and stories that the human himself turned the tide." Kathira inclined her head slightly. "That is correct. Captain Marcus Hale led a strike force into enemy lines. His actions broke the Kravith swarm and gave us the chance to destroy them." A murmur spread among the counselors. Some looked impressed, others doubtful. One leaned forward. "Do you mean to say, General, that without this human the fleet might have fallen?" Kathira did not hesitate. "Yes." The chamber was silent. Marcus stood quietly. He did not speak unless spoken to. When the council turned to him, their questions were sharp. "Human, what drove you to take such a reckless risk?" Marcus answered calmly. "Because it was the only path to victory. Playing safe would have doomed us all. Do you not fear death?" "Of course I do," Marcus said, meeting their eyes. "But fear doesn't mean surrender. Fear means you still have something worth protecting." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Even the counselors, who had seen centuries of war, paused. After the questioning ended, Marcus was dismissed from the chamber. Only Kathira remained, standing tall as the council turned to her. "You have evaluated many soldiers, General," the eldest counselor said. "Your judgment has shaped the Empire's armies. Tell us now, what is your evaluation of this human?" Kathira was silent for a long time. Her mind replayed the tests, the endurance run, the combat simulation, the strategy debates, the resilience trial. She remembered the fire of battle, the daring strike against the Kravith, and she remembered the way Marcus had carried himself, not with arrogance, not with pride, but with calm determination. Finally, she spoke. "My evaluation is this. Captain Marcus Hale is not merely fit for service. He is a commander in his own right. His people may be new to the galaxy, but their strength is not in claws, armor, or numbers. It is in their adaptability, their will, their refusal to surrender." She let the words hang in the air, then added, "I recommend that he be given command." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Counselors exchanged sharp looks. It was rare for Kathira to speak with such certainty, rarer still for her to recommend so strongly. The eldest counselor raised a hand, silencing the room. He studied Kathira for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Your word carries great weight, General. We will consider it." When Kathira left the chamber, she found Marcus waiting in the outer hall. "You defended me in there," he said quietly. Kathira's golden eyes narrowed. "I spoke the truth." "Do not mistake it for kindness," Marcus gave a faint smile. "Still, I appreciate it." For a moment, the two walked in silence through the grand halls of the starbase. Soldiers passed by, saluting Kathira and glancing curiously at Marcus. The whispers were louder now, half in doubt, half in awe. Finally, Kathira spoke again. "When I first received the order to evaluate you, I thought it was a waste of time. I thought humans were weak, fragile, unfit for true war." Marcus glanced at her. "And now?" Kathira paused, then gave the smallest nod. "Now I see I was wrong. It was not much, but from her it was more than praise." Days passed. Repairs to the fleet continued, and Marcus was given temporary command of a small unit. He drilled them in his own style, mixing human tactics with Xerix discipline, At first, the soldiers resisted, mocking his unusual methods. But slowly, as they saw the effectiveness, respect began to grow. Kathira watched from a distance. She saw how Marcus led, not through fear or cruelty, but through example. He pushed himself harder than he pushed his soldiers. He listened as much as he commanded. He earned their loyalty step by step. For Kathira, it was a strange thing to witness. She had always believed leadership was about strength and control. But Marcus showed another way, one she had never considered. Then came the ceremony. The council's decision had been made. In the great hall of the starbase, banners of silver and blue hung from the walls. Soldiers gathered in ranks. Officers stood at attention. At the center, Marcus stepped forward as the eldest counselor spoke. By the judgment of the High Council and the recommendation of General Kathira, Captain Marcus Hale of Earth is hereby granted command of a fleet within the Xerix Empire. His actions in battle have proven his worth, and his courage has earned our respect. A murmur of surprise spread through the crowd. Never before had a human been given such authority. Marcus bowed his head respectfully. I will serve with honor. Kathira watched as he spoke. For a brief moment, she felt something unusual stir in her chest. Pride. Later, in the quiet of the war room, Marcus entered to find Kathira already there, studying maps of the galaxy. He gave her a nod. I didn't expect you to support me so strongly. Kathira looked at him. You earned it. I do not waste words on those who do not deserve them. Marcus chuckled lightly. Coming from you, that's probably the highest praise I'll ever get. For a moment, Kathira allowed herself a small, almost invisible smile. Then she grew serious again. You have changed more than you know, human. Not just this fleet, not just this battle. You have changed me. Marcus tilted his head. How so? Kathira's golden eyes glowed softly. I thought strength was everything. But you have shown me that strength is not only in muscle or armor. It is in the mind, in the will, in the courage to choose the risky path when no safe path exists. She paused, then added, that is a lesson even a general can learn. The two stood in silence, gazing at the star map before them. The galaxy was vast, filled with enemies, challenges, and unknown dangers. But for the first time in many cycles, Kathira felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Hope. Not because of her empire's might. Not because of her own strength. But because of a single human who had proven that sometimes, the smallest spark could change the course of the stars. That night, when Kathira wrote her final report, she ended it with words she never thought she would write. The human has been evaluated, and I am taken aback.